All right, Shalom. First, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, Bahashem Makah Kodash. Double honors to the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. Um, Real quick, I did along with one of the other brothers, a breakdown in Daniel 7. All right, so Lord's willing, we could do Daniel's 8. Okay, and I'll see if the Spirit is willing, I can get through the chapter. Um, um Today. If not, I'll just do a part one and finish it later on. But through the Spirit, we're just gonna go right into it. Okay, and Lord's willing to be edifying to the elect. All right, which really a lot of the books of Daniel are historical and prophetic. You know, in the sense of when Daniel wrote a lot of these down, a lot of these visions he got, they were of the future from his time period. But now it's most of it is of the past. Okay, so what used to be prophecy is now history. Okay, because what, it came to pass. Okay, so we're just gonna get right into it. All right, which this is Daniel chapter 8, verse 1. It says, "In the third year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me Daniel, after that which appeared unto me at the first." All right, and this is talking about during the basically getting to the end of the Babylonian Empire, because Belshazzar unofficially was the last king of the Babylonian Empire. Okay, because really his father Nabonidus was the last official king. However, when you read the history, he left his son Belshazzar in charge. Okay, so Belshazzar was like the co-regent. That's why when you read in Daniel the 5th chapter, it refers to Belshazzar as the king, but he's really the king regent, so to speak. All right. So it says, "And I saw in a vision, and it came to pass when I saw that I was at Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in a vision, and I was by the river Ulai. Then I lifted up mine eyes," verse 3, "and saw, and behold, there stood before the ram," or Slakia, they stood before the river a ram which had two horns. And the two horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. And when you read in Daniel the 7th chapter, okay, this ram with two horns is the same as the bear. All right, as the bear that raised up itself on one side in Daniel the 7th chapter. Okay, and so I'm gonna read verse 3 again. It says, "Then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had two horns," and that ram represented the Medo-Persian Empire. All right, the two horns represented the Medes and the Persians. Okay, it says, "And the two horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last." So who came up last? The Persians, because it started with the Medes. All right, and then after they were taken down, okay, by Cyrus, who was a Persian. Okay, the Persians came into rulership. Now, as you notice, it was two horns on one beast, the ram. Okay, because the Medes and the Persians it was a Medo-Persian empire, but you would have either the Medes on top or the Persians on top. All right, and getting to the end of it, like it says, the higher came up last. That was the Persians, and it became known as the Achaemenid Empire. Okay, it says verse 4, "And I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward." Okay, and that's because you have Persia, okay, which is on around the east. Okay, and so they started pushing westward. Okay, towards Israel. All right, past Babylon towards Israel, northward. All right, headed towards what's today known as Asia Minor. All right, from that place on. Okay, which when you read it in Daniel the 7th chapter, it talks about the bear having three ribs in its mouth. All right, those three ribs represented Lydia, okay, Babylon, and Egypt. And if you look at those geographical locations, Lydia, which was in Anatolia or modern day Turkey, that was north, all right, of the Persians. Okay, and then the westward will be where Babylon is at. All right, and southward, all right, well, southwest will be where Egypt is at. Okay, but when you look at, if you were to look up a map of the Achaemenid Empire, you'll see how big their empire became, all right, as they conquered and swallowed up these other nations, to the point where they even crossed, all right, to the west of the Mediterranean, to certain parts of Greece. Okay. It says, so that no beast might stand before him, and the beast represent nations and people. Okay. It says, neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand, but he did according to his will and became great. All right, because at the time, all right, that the Persians were ruling, they were set up to rule. Okay. Quick precept will be here in Daniel chapter 4, verse 17. It says, this matter is by the decree of the watchers, and the demand by the word of the holy ones, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will, and setteth up over it the basis of men. So the Lord gives the king, he sets up who's going to be ruling when and how long they're going to rule for. And he set up the Persians to fulfill prophecy, all right, because it was prophesied, all right, by Daniel in the form of his visions, also the vision that Nebuchadnezzar had of the statue. So these had to come to pass. All right. That's why when the Persians were in rulership, it says none could stand before them, because the Lord has set them up to rule for that particular point in time. All right. And when you watch the movie 300, the Persians were in rulership. All right. And then you had the really 300 was centered around the Battle of Thermopylae. Okay. That was the Persians against the Greeks, which the 300 were Israelites. All right. Now, there's a scene in there that basically when the Leonidas and his squad wanted to go up and fight against them, all right, they were considered madmen, because the Persians were just like, it was unthinkable to even try and fight against them. So when he kicked that messenger, even when the messenger came to give him the message, and then he started acting hostile, the messenger was looking at him like, yo, you better think carefully about what you about to do here. Because even the messenger didn't expect him to do something outrageous as to kick him down a well, because they knew, yo, you don't want war with the Persians. All right. Verse 5, it says, and as I was considering, behold, an he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. Now this he-goat represents the Greeks. Okay. Because after the Battle of Thermopylae, okay, which eventually Xerxes had to end up fleeing, okay, the Greeks saw that, yo, these guys are not unbeatable after all, okay, and they actually started pushing, all right, eastward, okay, and trying to gain more freedom, you could say. All right. Hence, you had the Ionian Revolt, which is one of the primary reasons actually as to why Darius, the father of Xerxes, went up into Greece to try and mess them up, because he wanted revenge for them revolting. But nonetheless, that was when the Lord started putting that spirit in the Greeks, because it wasn't going to be until a couple hundred years later down the line that they eventually took down the Persians. But he started putting that spirit in them to start, becoming, because they were the next up. Okay. So you had Philip, all right, and then the main character, who was Alexander, all right, Alexander the Greek, I'm gonna call him that. All right. The Greeks that he-goat that came from the west represented the Greeks, because they Macedon, all right, where Alexander and his pops came from to conquer the Persians, was on the west. Okay. It says, and it says, and touch not the ground, because of how quick he was conquering these nations. Okay. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes, and the horn represented Alexander himself. Verse 6, and he came to the ram that had two horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran onto him in the fury of his power. All right. And this is when the Greeks took down the Persians. Okay. It says, and I saw him come close onto the ram, and he was moved with choler, which means bitterness or anger, all right, against him, and smote the ram, and brake his two horns. And there was no power in the ram to stand before him, but he cast him down to the ground, and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. All right, because if you look up the battle of Gaugamela, all right, that was when Alexander basically defeated Darius III, which was the final king of or the last king of the Persian Empire, and he took it over. So all the territories that the Persians had, not now that went under the Greeks. Okay, and Alexander had the idea of Pan-Hellenism. All right, Pan meaning all and Hellene meaning Greek. So to Greekitize everything. All right. Now, when you read in the Josephus, when he got to Jerusalem, all right, he actually allowed them, because he had seen the priest in a vision. He actually allowed them to not be subject to the same conditions as the other nations. Okay. Verse 8, it says, therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, right, because after Alexander, all right, or after the Greeks led by Alexander had conquered this vast land, okay, basically the known world, all right, the most part of it, and they had reached their peak, it says what? The great horn was broken, so Alexander died, all right, and for it came up four notable ones towards the four winds of heaven. And those four notable ones represented Alexander's generals or his successors. All right. Now you had Cassander, you had more than four generals. All right, but that's why it says notable ones. These were the ones who really stood out at the end. All right. And you had Cassander, Lysimachus, Ptolemy, Seleucus, and Antigonus. And Antigonus, for the most part, had a very big portion. All right. Of the Greek Empire, okay, but at the Battle of Ipsus, that was when the generals got together and they took him out, and then basically his portion went mostly to Seleucus, okay. So the notable four with Antigonus out the picture was now Ptolemy, Seleucus, Lysimachus, and Cassander, which Ptolemy had Egypt, all right. Seleucus had he basically had from Babylon all up Syria, Gaul, Syria, to Turkey, all right, or Anatolia, okay. And then you had Lysimachus and Cassander, which were on the west in Greece. So those were the four notable ones. Now it's said here that when the he-goat waxed very strong, all right, the horn was broken. You can read about that here. Get a quick precept on it, because the book of Maccabees, all right, is linked, all right, with the book of Daniel, because a lot of the prophecies that were spoken of in the book of Daniel came to pass in the book of Maccabees, all right. And Antiochus, all right, which we're gonna get to, because he's in this chapter, was a very big focal point, okay, in the prophecies of Daniel, because he did put a lot of hell, all right, upon the nation of Israel. The Lord used him, all right, to bring a lot of hell and destruction to the nation of Israel. Okay. Now I'm just gonna get a quick precept here, backing up what we just read in Daniel 8, verse 8. Okay, so this is First Maccabees chapter 1, and I'll start at verse 1. It says, and it happened after that Alexander, son of Philip, the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Kittim, had smitten Darius, the king of the Persians and the Medes, that he reigned in his stead the first over Greece. And that's what we just read. The he-goat, all right, taking out the ram. Verse 2, and made many wars and won many strongholds and slew the kings of the earth, all right, and went through to the ends of the earth and took spoils of many nations, so much that the earth was quiet before him. Whereupon he was exalted and his heart was lifted up. All right. And that's what we read about here, verse 8, Daniel 8 and 8. Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and for it came up four notable ones towards the four winds of heaven. We're going to read that in the book of Maccabees. So First Maccabees chapter 1, continuing at verse 4. And he gathered a mighty strong host and ruled over countries and nations and kings, who became tributaries unto him, talking about Alexander, all right, aka that notable horn. Um, it says, after these things, he fell sick and perceived that he should die, because this is when that horn was about to be broken. Wherefore he called his servants, such as were honorable and had been brought up with him from his youth, and parted his kingdom among them while he was yet alive. And that was the partition of Babylon, which you can look that up, which it got reformed later on, all right, and became the partition of I think Triparadises or so. But the partition of Babylon was a division of Alexander's kingdom amongst his generals. All right. Verse 7, so it says, so Alexander reigned 12 years and then died, and his servants bare rule every one in his place. And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves, so that their sons after them many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth. All right, I'm going to stop there for now. Okay, so that's what we just read here. Those four notable ones, they're the ones who at the end had the great divisions of the Greek Empire. All right. Shalom. So verse 9, it says, Daniel 8, verse 9, and out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great, toward the south and toward the east and toward the pleasant land. Okay. And this little horn, all right, represents Antiochus Epiphanes. Okay. Because it says here, out of one of those generals came forth a little horn, okay, which waxed exceeding great towards the south and towards the east and towards the pleasant land. Now, after Alexander's kingdom was divided, okay, the main focus was between the Seleucids, all right, or the Seleucid Empire, which was north of Israel, all right, from Syria north, and the Ptolemaic Empire, which was Egypt. Okay, so what you had was, when you read in Daniel the 11th chapter, is really just going into the Syrian wars, which was the wars between the Ptolemies and the Seleucids over Syria. Okay, the 6 Syrian wars, that's what it was about. Now, all right, now the thing was, Ptolemy, the first Ptolemy the first Soter, didn't go to war with Seleucus the first, all right, because they were actually buddies, you could say. It was their sons after them, all right, that actually started going to war with each other. Okay. And Antiochus Epiphanes came from the Seleucid line, because you had Seleucus Nicator, and he had a son, Antiochus the first Soter, whose son was Antiochus the second Theos, and then you had Seleucus the second Callinicus, and then Seleucus the third Cyrannus, whose brother was Antiochus the Great, the third, and then his son was Antiochus the third. His son, you can look up the lineage, was Seleucus the fourth Philopator, but he also had another son who was Mithridates. All right, that whose name later on became Antiochus Epiphanes. All right, he was held hostage at Rome. Just a brief summary. He was held hostage at Rome. All right, while his brother Seleucus the fourth Philopator was ruling. Okay, and it was Seleucus the fourth, all right, Philopator, that you read about in the book of Maccabees, that he sent Heliodorus to come and get the gold and the riches from Jerusalem, and the angels came down and gave him a divine ass whooping, and Heliodorus went back and told him, yo, that was Seleucus the fourth. Now, when Antiochus was free from Rome, from being held hostage at Rome, he came back, all right, after Seleucus had died, and Seleucus's son, okay, whose name was Antiochus, was ruling, and this was Mithridates, or Antiochus Epiphanes' nephew. All right, so when Antiochus came in, he didn't come in there, oh yeah, I'm about to run shit, No, he came in there low key and subtle. All right, he came in there all subtle, nice and sweet, like, oh, I'm, that's my nephew. I'm gonna tutor him. I'll be like a co-ruler and help him and make sure everything is good. Guess what? He snuck in there just like that, and before long, he assassinated his nephew, and he took the rulership. All right, and he changed his name to Antiochus Theos Epiphanes, or God manifest, which showed you he was a proud demon. Okay, so he was that little horn, all right, that came from the Seleucid line, all right, which, jumping back to the book of Maccabees, okay, I'm gonna continue in Maccabees because, like I'm showing you, it's linked. Okay, now the book of Daniel was hundreds of years before this. Okay, so back into the book of Maccabees, First Maccabees 1, verse 8, it says, or I'll start at verse 7. So Alexander reigned 12 years and then died, and his servants bare rule, every one in his place. And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves. So did their sons after them many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth. Verse 10, and there came up out of them a wicked root, and that's that little horn which we're reading about in Daniel, the 8th chapter. All right. It says, there came up out of them, out of the Seleucid line, a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, which is Antiochus the third. All right. It says, who had been an hostage at Rome. So you got to understand that when you read Antiochus, it's not just Antiochus. That's it. That's him. No, that's like Ptolemy. You have Ptolemy the first, Ptolemy the second. So you have to know which Antiochus is speaking of, or else you might get confused and say, wait, Antiochus, son of Antiochus, what? You know? So I'm going to keep reading verse 10. And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus surnamed Epiphanes, all right, son of Antiochus the king, who had been hostage at Rome. Because his father Antiochus the third, or Antiochus the king, had lost to the Romans. And a part of the consequence, all right, when you look up the Treaty of Apamea, a part of the consequence for losing to the Romans was war indemnities, but he also has to supply them with hostages. And one of those hostages had to be his son, or the heir. Okay, so Antiochus the third, the great, who had lost to the Romans, had to give up one of his sons to be held hostage. And that son was Antiochus the fourth Epiphanes, while his other son, Seleucus the fourth Philopator, was ruling. This is why Seleucus sent Heliodorus to get the money from the temple, because Seleucus had to raise up taxes so he could keep up or afford the payments to the Romans. All right. So going on back in verse 10, I'm going to read it again. And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been an hostage at Rome. And he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. Okay, so like we read here in Daniel chapter 8, verse 9, and out of one of them came forth a little horn, that was Antiochus Epiphanes, who waxed exceeding great toward the south and toward the east and toward the pleasant land. All right, because once again, the whole battle was over that Levant area. Okay, because whoever controlled the Levant, okay, you basically, because in order to get from Egypt to Mesopotamia or to Europe or to Turkey, all those areas, you had to go through Israel. Okay, you had the Via Maris and the King's Highway. Okay, and these were paths that would take you. The Via Maris, which just means by the sea, or the way of the sea, was on the coastal lines, all right, of Israel, all the way on the west, all right, on the coast. And then you cut through Megiddo, cut to Damascus, and join the King's Highway, which was like that's like the I-95, you know, that'll take you wherever you got to go, and so on and so forth. So if you control that land, guess what? You had a lot of power. If people were trying to go from one place to another, whether it was trade or whatever, you could tax them. All right. You could say, nah, you can't go through here. Okay. So continuing, it says, I'm gonna read verse 9 again, Daniel 8 and 9. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, Antiochus Epiphanes, which waxed exceeding great toward the south and toward the east and toward the pleasant land, which is Israel. All right. And it waxed great even to the host of heaven, which are Israelites. And it cast down some of the stars to the ground and stamped upon them, which are also Israelites. You read about them in First Maccabees, the first chapter. All right, what Antiochus did. Verse 11, yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. Now let's read about that. Okay, we're gonna jump back into First Maccabees, the first chapter, and we're gonna try to get to the point. So let's go to First Maccabees 1 and Salakia. Let me see. 1 and 20. It says, and after that Antiochus had smitten Egypt, he returned again in the 143rd year, and went up against Israel and Jerusalem with a great multitude, and entered proudly into the sanctuary, and took away the golden altar, and the candlestick of light, and all the vessels thereof, and the table of the showbread, and the pouring vessels, and the vials, and the censers of gold, and the veil, and the crowns, and the golden ornaments that were before the temple, all which he pulled off. He took also the silver and the gold, and the precious vessels. Also he took the hidden treasures which he found. And when he had taken all away, he went into his own land, having made a great massacre and spoken very proudly. I want to go to the part because I know there's a part about the daily sacrifice. It mentions it here. Okay, let me see. That's a lot here. I know it's probably closer to the 40th verse. Yep, there it is. First Maccabees 1 and verse 41. Moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people, and every one should leave his laws. So all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king. Yea, many also of the Israelites consented to his religion, and sacrificed unto idols, and profaned the Sabbath. For the king had sent letters by messengers unto Jerusalem and the cities of Judah, that they should follow the strange laws of the land, and forbid burnt offerings and sacrifice and drink offerings in the temple, that they should profane the Sabbaths and the feast days, and pollute the sanctuary and holy people. Okay. Verse 47, set up altars and groves and chapels of idols, and sacrifice swine's flesh and unclean beasts. Okay. So as we're reading here, okay, in Daniel 8, verse 11, he says, yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away. We just read that here. Okay. And the place of his sanctuary was cast down. We just read that in the book of Maccabees. So we're literally reading the fulfillment of Daniel, the 8th chapter, in the book of Maccabees, because it happened. Okay. Verse 12, and an host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and practiced and prospered, because the Lord had given it into his hand for him to be able to do such things, all right, and prosper in it, because it was part of the punishment. Okay. Verse 13, and I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot? And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Which, when you do the calculation, that's about 6.5 years. Okay. It says, and it came to pass because it was after that when the Maccabees revolted. Okay, it was after that that they rededicated the temple, where you have the Feast of Dedication. Okay, it says, because that was when the sanctuary was cleansed. Now I think that should be in here, if I could find it. Let's see. Yeah, con, definitely. Whatever question you got, just put on the comment board. Um, boy, I want to see if I can find it. Uh, oh, let me see. Salaki, I'm trying to find this precept. Let me see. Feast. Okay. It should be first. Yep, first Maccabees. All right, let's check this out. They say 4 and 52. Let's take a look at that. And then the reason I'm not doing the screen share is because I don't want it to start breaking up and cutting off the feed again. Okay. Yep, first Maccabees 4 and verse 44. It says here, and when as they consulted what to do with the altar of burnt offerings which was profaned, they thought it best to pull it down, lest it should be a reproach to them, because the heathen had defiled it. Wherefore they pulled it down and laid up the stones in the mountain of the temple in a convenient place, until there should come a prophet to show what should be done with them. Then they took whole stones according to the law and built a new altar according to the former, and made up the sanctuary and the things that were within the temple, and hallowed the courts. They made also new holy vessels, and into the temple they brought the candlestick and the altar of burnt offerings and of incense and the table. And upon the altar they burned incense, and the lamps that were upon the candlestick they lighted, that they might give light in the temple. Furthermore, they set the loaves upon the table and spread out the veils and finished all the work which they had begun to make. Now, on the 25th day of the 9th month, and this was the cleansing, all right, which is called the month Caslu, in the 148th year, they rose up betimes in the morning and offered sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar of burnt offerings which they had made. Yeah, and they're basically just gonna go into it. All right. I'll jump down to verse 59. Moreover, Judas and his brethren with the whole congregation of Israel ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year by the space of 8 days, from the 25th day of the month Caslu, with mirth and gladness. Okay. So now let's go back. We're at Daniel 8, verse 15. And it came to pass, when even I, Daniel, had seen the vision and sought for the meaning, behold, there stood before me as the appearance of a man. Yeah, because certain visions, you got to understand, Daniel, he's in a time where the Persians, all right, haven't come up yet, because this is the time of Belshazzar. Okay, the Persians haven't taken over yet, let alone the Greeks. So he's seeing these things, and he's like, what's that about? Verse 16, and I heard a man's voice between the banks of Ulai, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. And Gabriel is one of the archangels. So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid and fell upon my face. But he said unto me, understand, O son of man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. All right, which there's a reason Daniel was scared, because the angels have a fierce look. All right, they're not a bunch of naked babies who fly around with wings on their back like Cupid's shooting love arrows at you for Valentine's Day. No. Okay. It says, verse 18, now as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep upon on my face toward the ground. But he touched me and set me upright. And he said, Behold, I will make thee to know what shall be in the last end of the indignation, for at the time appointed the end shall be. All right. And what's it called? And the scripture is actually going to break itself down. Okay. Verse 20, the ram which thou sawest having two horns are the kings of Media and Persia, and the rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. And who was the first king of the Greeks? Alexander. That's why they call him Alexander the Great. Okay. Now that being broken, whereas four stood up for it, four kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power. All right. And when you read in other verses, it says not in his posterity. Why? Because it wasn't Alexander's sons, all right, or his direct lineage that ruled, but it was his generals. And they ruled how they wanted to rule. Okay. Verse 23, and in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up. It says, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power, and he shall destroy wonderfully. And this is talking about Antiochus, all right, Epiphanes. Okay, because the thing with Antiochus was, in order to, when he was going against Egypt, he'd have to go and mount such a huge army, and they weren't all his people. Most of them, or some of them, were mercenaries. Okay, that he would gather up. All right, and guess what? They'd come and get the work done. Okay, and he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people, which were Israelites. Which, like I said, you could read about that. If you read the whole book of the Maccabees, the first chapter, you'll see the atrocities that were committed. Okay, and really the whole book of Maccabees. All right. And through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart. And what did he say? And what did we read in First Maccabees? That he made a decree that all should be one people, and that they should leave their customs and their laws and come and serve his laws and stuff like that. You know, they set up altars to Jupiter, which is just a Roman version of Zeus. Okay, Bacchus. Okay, when you read about it, one of the plants, all right, as a form of worshiping Bacchus was ivy. And it tells you that in the book of Maccabees that they had Israelites coming in there with ivy, having to bring it in reverence to Bacchus. Okay. Verse 25, and through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand, because he got so proud. He thought that he could come against the Most High. He thought, well, I'm. That's why he named himself Theos Epiphanes, God manifest. Okay, thinking he was above it all. But like it says here, but he shall be broken without hand. Okay, now let's get a precept on that. Second Maccabees. Second Maccabees chapter 9. I'll start at verse 1. It says, about that time came Antiochus with dishonor out of the country of Persia, for he had entered the city called Persepolis, and went about to rob the temple and to hold the city, whereupon the multitude, running to defend themselves with their weapons, put them to flight. And so it happened that Antiochus, being put to flight of the inhabitants, returned with shame. Now when he came to Ecbatane, news was brought him what had happened unto Nicanor and Timotheus. Then swelling up with anger, he thought to avenge upon the Jews the disgrace done unto him by those that made him flee, because that's what he would do. He would take out his anger on Israel. But there was a reason why he would take it out on Israelites, because the Lord had set it up to where it was a means of punishing Israel, because Israel was doing some wicked ass shit. Okay, ever since they came back from the Persian captivity, you had Ezra, you had Nehemiah, all right, certain priests that would keep them in line, but sooner or later, Jake started going off again. Okay, in the book of Malachi, it tells you how they were not Malachi, Slakia, Micah. Okay, it tells you how they were sacrificing basically, instead of getting the best and the first of their flock, they just take whatever, if it's sick, whatever, then sacrifice unclean sacrifices, So Jake was going off. And the Lord, what? Lo and behold, the Lord said, you ain't going to escape. Yeah, he'll forgive you, but you have to pay for what you've done. Okay? And that's why when we're reading Daniel, it mentions what? The indignation. All right? Continuing in verse 4. Therefore commanded he his chariot men to drive without ceasing and to dispatch the journey, the judgment of God now following him. For he had, check this out, for he had spoken proudly in this sort, that he would come to Jerusalem and make it a common burying place of the Jews. All right. So he was speaking proudly, not just against Jake, but against the Most High. And that's why the Most High had a death angel right up behind him, about to strike him down. Okay. So we're going to jump back to Daniel, and we're going to come back here again. Daniel 8, verse 25. And through his policy also he shall cause the craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart. All right. And by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. And we're going to read how he was broken without hand. Verse 5. But the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, smote him with an incurable and invisible plague. For as soon as he had spoken these words, a pain of the bowels that was remediless came upon him, and sore torments of the inner parts. And the most justly, for he had tormented other men's bowels with many and strange torments. But check this out. Check how proud he was. After the Lord done plagued him, it says, howbeit he nothing at all ceased from his bragging, but still was filled with pride, breathing out fire in his rage against the Jews, and commanding to haste the journey. But it came to pass that he fell down from his chariot, carried violently, so that having a sore fall, all the members of his body were much pained. So he was hurt. He fell out there, probably cursing out and all that. Now check this out. It says, and thus he that a little afore thought he might command the waves of the sea, so proud was he beyond the condition of man, and weigh the high mountains in a balance, was now cast on the ground and carried in a horse litter, showing forth unto all the manifest power of God, so that the worms rose out of the body of this wicked man. So he was alive, and his body was decaying from the inside out. He was being eaten by worms. All right. Shows you the fear of the Lord, man. It says, and whilst he lived in sorrow and pain, his flesh fell away, and the filthiness of his smell was noisome to all his army. And the man that thought a little afore he could reach to the stars of heaven, no man could endure to carry for his intolerable stink. Here therefore being plagued, he began to leave off his great pride, and to come to the knowledge of himself by the scourge of God, his pain increasing every moment. And when he himself could not abide his own smell, he said these words, it is meet to be subject unto God, and that a man that is mortal should not proudly think of himself as if he were God. So here you got a wicked ass demon, proud as hell. But guess what? The Most High humbled his ass down, man. This is how he was broken without hand, because it wasn't somebody who came up and slew him. It was an angel, all right, through the orders of the Most High that plagued him, all right. Verse 13, this wicked person vowed also unto the Lord, who now now no more would have mercy upon him. All right, saying thus. So the Lord had already set his judgment. He was gonna die from that. Okay, and let me see where it mentions. Yep. Verse 18. I'm gonna jump down to verse 18. It says, but for all this, because he started speaking good now. Oh, I'm gonna do this good for the Jews. Oh, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do. But the Lord said, no, that's it, you're done. Verse 18. But for all this, his pains would not cease, for the just judgment of the Most High was come upon him. Therefore, despairing for his health, he wrote unto the Jews the letter underwritten, containing the form of a supplication after this manner. And then he goes in and writes it and writes it and writes it and writes it. Verse 28, thus the murderer and blasphemer, having suffered most grievously as he entreated other men, so died he a miserable death in a strange country in the mountains. All right. So yeah, that was basically how he was broken without hand. Daniel 8 and 25. All right, 2 more verses. It says, and the vision of the evening and the morning which was told is true. Wherefore shut thou up the vision, for it shall be for many days. Because it was a long time from the time Daniel had this vision in the time of Belshazzar, the Babylonian Empire. Now, if the Babylonian Empire fell like what 530, 539 along that time, and we're talking about 160 something, all right, BC. That's a whole lot of years. Damn near what, like 400 years or so. So like it says, it's for many days, because this took place already, all right, which we just read about in the book of Maccabees. Verse 27, and I, Daniel, fainted and was sick certain days. Afterward, I rose up and did the king's business, and I was astonished at the vision, but none understood it. Why? Because it wasn't meant for them to understand it then, but for us now to be able to understand it. Okay, but yeah, that's basically it. That concludes the book of Daniel, the 8th chapter. Okay, as you can see, man, this is, and if you were to look up these characters, all right, look them up online, it's right there. All right, it'll reference Daniel the 8th chapter when you look up Antiochus the 4th Epiphanes. These were real people. So this is a historical book. It's not some make believe, and no, it's historical. It's historically accurate, and archaeologists and historians actually reference it as a historical book. Now it has laws and traditions and stuff in there, but it's also used as a historical record, because it's the most historically accurate book out there. All right, and there's archaeological proof, and amongst others, to back up the things written in here. Okay, as well as the Apocrypha. And as you can see, a lot of the prophecies written in here were fulfilled in here. Hence, they took out this book. Hence, they took out the Apocrypha, which Apocrypha means hidden. Okay, so hey, man, but we at that time where the Lord is bringing out that truth. Okay, so hey, this is why these devils are getting scared. This is why they want to take us off, because this truth that they've tried so hard to hide, all right, it's coming out. All right, and there's nothing they could do about it. Now, before I ended, the brother Isaiah 55, you said you had a question. Shalom, Mark, if you don't mind, I have a question when you're done teaching, if that's all right. Yeah, go ahead. You can ask a question. All right. But yeah, man. Okay, it loads on my phone faster. I don't do videos, but at the very least I can repost them, but I don't even know how to do that. I looked it up but still don't understand. Do you think you could be able to show how to do that? Oh, Khan. Yeah, definitely. Hey, Shalom, Hakim. To download the videos, well, usually you can go to, let me see if I can screen share it real quick. YouTube. This is one that you could use here. Let me actually start from scratch. All right, let's say you go to Google, right? If you were to go to Google, you could do YouTube to MP3 Shark. And then you click on this one, as you can see, YouTube MP3.cc. All right. You can click on this right there, YouTube to MP3 converter. All right. And you have MP3 and MP4. So for videos, you would click on MP4. Okay. Now, let's say I was to go to YouTube right now, and there was a video I'm trying to download so I can re-upload it. I'll go to YouTube. I'll let it load real quick. Okay. Okay. Just give it 1 second. Okay. Let's just take a quick video. All right. Let's take this one, right? This is Man of Valor 12 West Coast. So the brothers did a video. All right. It's streamed. It's 55 minutes. All right. Let's do the 15-minute one. All right. So what you can do is you can right click on it. You can copy the link. Okay. And once you copy the link, you go back here. Make sure you're on MP4. All right. You're going to click here, and then you're going to paste that link in here. And then what you're going to do is you're going to click convert. Okay. And what it's going to do is it's going to convert that link from a YouTube file to a MP4. Okay, I'm guessing it's not letting me do that because they just streamed it. So let me see if I can get a video. All right, let's do something like this one. Okay. Let's try it again. That should work for this. Right. And what you would do is you just click download. Okay. You just click download and boom, it just goes through and you hit convert next. Now, there's also another way you can do it. Okay. There's also another way you can do it. You can go to YouTube. Let's say you click on a video. So if I click on this video here, I'm going to silence it. And then you can just go ahead and all right, now if I remember correctly, I think it was before. There we go. So what you're going to do is you're going to click the link in here in the top, and right before, after www dot, before the Y, you're going to click SS, or you're going to type in SS, and then you hit enter. And that's going to take you to another link where you can actually download the video. All right, that you're on. Okay. So you see it'll load up, and then you just simply hit download. All right, and it downloads. With Android, I think you should just be able to straight up do that. If you were to open your browser and you were to go to YouTube, just go there, hit SS, and let it come to this page and download it, or just go to the YouTube to MP3 Shark and then try that same method. For Android, I believe it should work. With iPhone, it's a little more difficult. You might have to download like Documents 5, okay, or something like that as well. You know, Documents 5, or you can just look it up on YouTube, how to download videos from YouTube on iPhone, and there should be a lot of videos showing you how to get into it. Okay, so yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope that was able to answer your question. You know, and any brothers who might have had a similar question, you know, hopefully this will be a good way for those who are not able to do videos at the moment. You know, you can re-upload videos as well. Hey, that's how I started. I started re-uploading videos, you know, because I wanted to get involved. All right, but yeah, you know, that's just what it is. Shalom to those on the comment board. Amathia Zayan 144. Damn, this was mad edifying and a faith booster as well. The water, hey, the water Yahweh Shem El Shai. All right, that's as the scriptures say. That's why we do these videos. Okay, to edify the sheep, man. All right, that's what Yahweh Shai commanded us to do, to feed the sheep. All right, to feed the flock, feed the sheep, and to edify. You know, so hey, Lord's willing, this was edifying to the elect and anybody else who comes across this video. I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, Bahashem Machakwadash. Until next time, Shalom.